Good morning and welcome to Toolbox Tuesday, I should be saying. My name is Joanne Davis and I'm a safety advisor here out of the Regina office. Today we're going to be talking about developing your procedures, your safe job procedures. So the first thing we need to discuss is what is a safe job procedure? So a safe job procedure is a step-by-step instruction on how to perform a specific job or task. So this is going to display the safest and most effective way to complete that job. It often has a more narrow focus and it is very specifically sequenced. So you're going to have step number 1, step number 2, and so forth. A lot of times people do confuse safe job procedures and safe work practices. Practices are general guidelines, do's and don'ts, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later on. So again, your safe job procedure is step by step on how to perform that job. So next, let's talk about, okay, so what do we need a procedure for? Like, we're a company, we have a lot of things that we do. What exactly do we need a procedure for? So if you're new to this, it can be a little bit overwhelming because you should actually have safe job procedures for all the jobs and tasks that you do. So we always encourage our new companies coming into this and developing their procedures to start with the most critical tasks. So with that being said, a lot of people are like, well, what are critical tasks? Critical tasks are going to be jobs that have a high risk of injury or something you don't do very often, as well as maybe something specific for your company that you just have a lot of near misses for, maybe you've had incidences for. Those are going to be critical tasks for you. So I tell advisors, we often tell the companies to start with those high risk tasks that you perform and develop procedures for them. And then when you have those done, move on to your everyday tasks. Even stuff you do every day should have a procedure. It's great to review, make sure everybody's doing it the same way, keeping everybody safe. And when you have new people come on, it's a great way to train them as well. So a lot of times, you know, how do we get started? What do we use? A lot of companies will use a job hazard analysis. So you're going to take that specific job or task that you're doing, and you're going to analyze it. So here's an example form that you can use. So you put down what the job is, you list all the tools and equipment required, your materials that are required for that specific task, as well as any PPE, so personal protective equipment. You want to include the job or site specific equipment required, as well as any additional specialized personal protective equipment as well. And then you would list your steps. Oftentimes you're going to watch somebody do the job. It's also a very effective way to list the steps on how the job is being done. And then later you'll identify all the hazards and then go into the controls or procedures to control them. So we'll get a little bit more in detail in a couple slides on that. So while you're getting prepared to make a safe job procedure, who should be involved? Who should be on this team? Okay, so it's not usually so you don't have one person doing that. We really encourage you to have a group of people who have a range of experiences related to the task. You definitely want to include a worker who is competent and experienced in this task. As well, include somebody maybe that's new to your company or new to that task. They can give a perspective very differently because they haven't been doing it all the time, they're not familiar with it, and they will ask important questions and view things differently that you can incorporate into your procedure. So it's important to include them as well. And don't forget supervision, and definitely you want to have management reviewing them, making sure that that is in fact the way that this job needs to be done. And don't forget about your occupational health and safety committee members. You can include one of them as well, because they're often part of putting your safety manual together and reviewing those procedures. When you are getting ready to actually develop your procedure, don't forget to check regulations. Oftentimes you're going to find that regulations does have specific requirements for certain tasks, and you want to make sure that you actually include them in your safe job procedure and actually list the regulation that pertains to it on the bottom of your procedure as well. Okay, so now you're you're together with your team, you're taking a look at the task, you're watching somebody do it and discussing it. So at each step, you want to take a look at the hazards associated with that step of the job. So you could be looking at hazardous materials. It could be chemical, biological, so on. What are the physical hazards? Electrical, it could be heat, working at heights, right? You want to take a look at any of the hazards associated with those steps. What could happen? What could go wrong? And then, so you can identify those at each of those steps. So now that we have identified the hazards, it's going to be really important for you to actually list the controls to mitigate those hazards. So as we have done quite often in our courses, as well as other webinars and toolbox talks, you see the hierarchy of controls. So quickly, when you're picking a control, you want to pick the most effective, which is elimination. So that's physically removing the hazard. Then substitution is the next effective control, by replacing it with something less hazardous. Then you would actually go into engineering control. This is where you isolate people from that hazard. So a lot of times you see physical guards and barriers in this situation. Administrative control, this is changing the way people work, and actually a safe job procedure is an administrative control as well. So you could include those as well. And last but not least, you do have your personal protective equipment. So it is the least effective, but it's also, personal protective equipment is still important. It's your last line of defense, but you should also be including it. Speaking of PPE, you do want to make sure that on your safe job procedure that you do list the PPE. So sometimes you see companies, they'll put basic PPE. You actually should be listing what is your basic PPE for that site. So oftentimes you're going to see that you need the safety boots, your hard hat, protective eyewear, gloves, maybe something mandatory in all your sites. And in this situation, maybe you're working with a loud tool, and so you want hearing protection as well. So you make sure you list all of the PPE required for that task. Okay, so once that you have developed it and you've gone through it, rearranged it a little bit, it's been approved, the next step is you definitely want to make sure everybody is trained on it. So here you can see they're passing one around. It's got some pictures as well as steps on the other side, and they're making notes. Going over it, you want to make sure that you actually are trained on that procedure and that your workers are trained, and whether this is a brand new procedure or maybe a revised one. You want to take the time to actually review this procedure. Okay, so we talked about that job hazard analysis. So here you can see that we have all the columns filled in. This one specifically is for handheld power saw. So here we have the materials required, a board and sheet wood. And then the personal protective equipment, we have hard hat, high dexterity gloves, safety glasses, earplugs, and you would actually also need your safety boots as well. First step, inspect the handheld power saw. And then it tells you the potential hazards, cutting on blade or engaging the saw. And then your recommended procedure and control would be to wear gloves, ensure saw is not connected to the power source. And you can go on every step. The next one is to connect it to the power source and make sure the cord's long enough and not end up creating a tripping hazard. And so what you can do is when you rewrite it, you can actually change the title to Safe Job Procedure Handheld Power Saw. Step number 1 would be inspect handheld power saw while wearing gloves and ensuring saw is not connected to power source. So you can see where you don't actually have to, you can reword it a little bit in the form column and actually have your safe job procedure come out of your job hazard analysis. You can see clearly that is step by step. And they even have all the way down at the last step here, after you test it, secure the products being cut, you would then cut the product and then you would stow the saw. So you're going to make sure that after you are done, that you unplug the cord, wrap it up and put it away properly. So you include the final steps as well. So one you had in the form, the last slide I showed you was actually still in the form, and you can use that for your safe job procedure. And this slide actually shows you more of a narrative style. So at the top, this is manual lifting. You can see at the top manual lifting, and it is actually this, the top is a procedure and the bottom is a practice, which I'll talk about in a minute. So here you do still have your material and equipment required, and this is for manual lifting. No material really required except for what you're lifting. And then personal protective equipment, basic PPE, and it is stated as hard hat, glasses, work boots. And then it's listed the job steps, telling you to know your limits when lifting and moving heavy or bulky objects. If the load is too heavy, get someone to assist you. Use mechanical lift equipment. Get proper instruction on back care and lifting methods. So first step is know what you can lift. Second step, before lifting, make sure your path where you will carry the load is clear and free of obstacles. 3 is make sure that there's a place and a way for you to set down the load without injuring your fingers. 4, warm up your muscles. 5, you need to attend good footing. 6, bend at the knees, get a good grip on the object being lifted. 7, tighten your abdominal muscles and lift, straightening your legs. Keep your back straight. Keep your arms and the object close to your body. 8, lift slowly, take small steps. 9, push, don't pull on loads. 10, keep your balance and do not twist or turn when you lift and carry the load. Move your feet to turn your body in the direction. To put down the object down again, do not bend at the waist. Keep your back straight and bend at your knees. Keep the object close to your body until it is placed in a secure position. So you can see in the steps, it started from before you picked up the object to when you are now done. And at the bottom, we do have reference to applicable legislation. So that's another style of your safe work procedure, safe job procedure. The bottom one here is actually a practice, and I just want to show you the difference because there's sometimes some confusion. So obviously the procedure is step by step, and the practice for the same manual lifting and carrying, it does state your protective equipment, personal protective equipment, and then it actually gives some general guidelines. Ensure you know your limitations. The use of power equipment, mechanical lifting devices should be considered. Obtain assistance when lifting heavy objects. Ensure good grip before lifting and employ proper lifting techniques. Avoid reaching out. And then you have pipes, conduit, reinforced rods, and other conductive materials should not be carried on the shoulder near exposed live electrical equipment, and be aware of hazardous and unsafe conditions. So it's not giving you a step-by-step, it's just giving you general guidelines. And it's also including your regulations at the bottom. So I just want to show you a little bit of the differences. They are similar, but there is differences. There was not a step-by-step in the actual practice. Okay, moving on. Another thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is, now that you actually have your safe job procedures built, as you're building them, you want to make sure that you actually review them. So just like when you did develop them, you want to actually, we encourage at least an annual review where you'd actually take that procedure out and go through that process again. Watch somebody do the job. Is this still how we do it? Do we need to change something? Is this effective? Maybe you have new technology that has helped and you need to incorporate that. And again, you want to review it and then retrain if there was any changes and go through it with your workers as well. So you want to make sure that you keep your safe job procedures. Usually they're kept in the manual. Sometimes they have their own binder. You want to make sure your workers have access to them, whether it be paper copy or digitally. You want to make sure, and a lot of times your workers do see your safe job procedures at orientations. A lot of them get reviewed there. Training sessions, maybe going through some, maybe you have new procedures or you just want to review them and go through training sessions. Toolbox talks are another great place to bring them up, as well as safety meetings. And the biggest thing here is we want to make sure we have access. So if there's any questions, somebody can just go and pull it out of the manual, whether it be digital, like I said, and just bring it up and review some stuff. And having the legislation listed on them is really good too, because then you can make sure that they could look up legislation about that task as well. Okay, so that is a toolbox talk on developing procedures. Again, if you need help with this, please reach out to our advisory services. We're more than happy to help you with these. And you can go online to more resources on scsaonline.ca. You can reach us advisors. We are on there. And there's documents, forms, legislation, expert articles, toolbox talks, and so on. And don't forget that you can download the app as well. We do have an app, and you just go to the App Store and press in SCSA, and you can find us there. So with this, don't forget that you can find our links to our previous Toolbox talks, as well as our webinar Wednesdays on YouTube and Facebook pages. You're going to find a variety of presentations, like I said, and you can share them with your crews for later viewing as well. And that brings us to the end of our Toolbox Tuesday. Thank you very much, and hope to see you tomorrow for our special webinar on diversity.